In the spring of 2012, a young founder sat in a dimly lit coffee shop staring at a text message on his phone. It wasn't a partnership offer. It wasn't a congratulatory note from an investor. It was a cold, calculated invitation. "We love what you've built," the message read. "Let's talk before we have to build it ourselves." Within 48 hours, behind the heavy double-locked doors of a skyscraper in Silicon Valley, a deal was signed. A startup that had spent 3 years innovating, pouring sweat, blood, and tears into a revolutionary platform, was quietly swallowed whole. For a sum of money that sounded like a typo, most people watched the news headlines and thought, "What a success story." They saw a young team getting rich, and a tech giant adding a cool new feature to their ecosystem. But if you look closer, past the polished press releases and the smiling handshakes, you begin to see a much darker reality. This wasn't a celebration of innovation. It was a hostage negotiation. Today, we are going to peel back the layers of a hidden economic machine that operates in the shadows of the global market. We are going to uncover the brutal, unspoken rules of corporate warfare and show you why the world's most powerful companies aren't buying their rivals to grow. They are doing it to survive. To understand how this invisible machine works, we first have to look at what they want you to see. When a giant like Disney buys Marvel, or Google buys YouTube, or Microsoft buys Activision Blizzard, the story we are sold is always the same: synergy, growth, better services for the consumer. We are told that by combining forces, these companies can share technology, lower their operational costs, and pass those savings down to you, the customer. It sounds logical, it sounds like progress. But this is the optical illusion. In reality, when a billion-dollar company looks at a rising competitor, they don't see a partner, they don't even see an acquisition target, they see an existential threat in the world of high-stakes business. There is a terrifying concept known as the kill zone. The kill zone is an invisible perimeter around a dominant tech giant or industry leader. If a startup enters this zone, if they build a product that is too good, or gather a user base that is too loyal, the giant has only two options. They must either smother them in their infancy or buy them out before they become too big to fail. Think about it. Why would a company with $80 billion in cash and thousands of the world's smartest engineers pay $19 billion for an app with only 55 employees? That is exactly what happened when Facebook bought WhatsApp in 2014. WhatsApp had virtually no revenue, it had a tiny team, but it had something far more valuable than gold: attention. Every hour a user spent on WhatsApp was an hour they weren't spending on Facebook's ecosystem. The threat wasn't that WhatsApp would start charging for its app. The threat was that WhatsApp was becoming the new internet. So the giant didn't buy WhatsApp to build a better messaging tool. They bought it to buy back their own future. They bought peace of mind. But here is the question most people never ask. How do they actually force these founders to sell? If you are a brilliant young entrepreneur and you believe your company could be the next Google, why would you agree to give up your baby, even for $100 million? Because behind the scenes, the giants have perfected a devastating tactic, a quiet, systematic squeeze. Imagine you are running a successful independent clothing brand. Suddenly, Amazon launches an identical version of your best-selling jacket at half the price and places it at the very top of their search results. At the same time, your advertising costs on Facebook and Google begin to skyrocket. Your shipping partners suddenly renegotiate your rates. Because the giants are buying up all the logistics capacity, you aren't being beaten. In a fair game, you are being starved of oxygen. This is the psychological leverage. When a giant approaches a startup with an acquisition offer, it is rarely a friendly conversation. It is an ultimatum wrapped in a velvet glove. Take our $50 million today, or we will spend $500 million copying your product and burying you on page 10 of the search results tomorrow. It is a choice between a wealthy retirement or corporate suicide. And so, the founder signs, they walk away with millions. But the revolutionary technology they spent years building is quietly locked inside a digital vault, never to be heard from again. This is what insiders call acqui-hiring. You buy the company not for its product, but to hire its brilliant engineers, and more importantly, to make sure those engineers are no longer working for anyone else. The innovation doesn't scale, it is sterilized. But where does the astronomical amount of money for these buyouts actually come from? Surely, even the biggest companies can't just keep spending billions of dollars in cash every single year without running dry. This is where we enter the engine room of the invisible machine, a place governed by financial alchemy and corporate debt. To the average person, debt is a burden. It is something you want to pay off as quickly as possible. But to a multi-billion-dollar corporation, debt is a weapon. Under the global tax code, interest payments on corporate debt are often tax-deductible. This means that if a giant borrows $10 billion to buy a competitor, the cost of borrowing that money is offset by the massive tax breaks they receive. In a strange, twisted way, the government is actually subsidizing the elimination of competition, and it gets even deeper. When a dominant company buys its rival, they aren't just buying physical assets like offices or factories. Often, the most expensive item on the balance sheet is something called goodwill. Goodwill is an accounting term for the intangible value of a brand, its reputation, its customer loyalty, its market position. By inflating the value of this goodwill, companies can write off billions of dollars in future taxes through amortization. The acquisition, effectively, pays for itself. It is a perfect self-reinforcing loop. A giant uses its massive scale to generate cash, uses that cash to borrow cheap debt, uses that debt to buy its rivals, and uses the tax write-offs from those acquisitions to pay off the debt. The competitor is gone, the tax bill is lowered, and the monopoly grows stronger, without the company ever having to invent a single new product. But why does Wall Street allow this? Why do investors, the people who fund these megacorporations, cheer when a company stops innovating and starts buying? Because of a brutal truth about investor psychology. Investors hate risk more than they love innovation. Research and development, actually building new things from scratch, is incredibly risky. You can spend 5 years and $1 billion trying to develop a new medicine or a new software platform and still fail completely. But buying an existing competitor, that is predictable. You already know their product works. You already know their customers are willing to pay. By acquiring them, you aren't just buying their revenue, you are buying their market share. You are removing the threat of price wars. When two major airlines compete, they lower ticket prices to attract passengers. When they merge, the competition disappears and ticket prices go up. For the consumer, this is a disaster, but for the Wall Street investor, it is a goldmine. It creates what Warren Buffett famously calls an economic moat. A moat is a structural barrier that protects a company's profits from competitors. And the widest, deepest moat of all is simply buying everyone else who knows how to dig. The result is an economy that looks like a thriving, competitive landscape on the surface, but is actually controlled by a handful of corporate puppets. Walk down the aisle of any supermarket, you will see hundreds of different brands of toothpaste, soap, and chips. They have different logos, different colors, different slogans, but if you trace the ownership back, you will find that almost every single one of those brands is owned by just 2 or 3 massive conglomerates. Unilever, Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo. We don't have a free market of infinite choices, we have the illusion of choice. This consolidation doesn't just affect the products we buy, it affects the very fabric of human progress. When a market becomes a monopoly, the incentive to innovate dies. If you control 90% of the search engine market, why would you spend billions making your search engine better? You don't have to. If you control the only social media platforms that matter, why would you worry about user privacy? Where else are they going to go? The invisible machine doesn't just swallow competitors, it swallows our collective future.